Oh, no, I'm not going to sit here. I'm just turning it on.
Yeah, full-time employee. Yeah, I started, I was appointed January 3rd. So I've only been here 2.5 months. It's, you know, because this thing was there. 6 o'clock, I'm downstairs, I walk up here, it's 6 o'clock, it's meeting, right? I'm here 4:10, miles for the most part. Twice a month, actually 3 times. Tuesdays and all the car wash. Not working.
That is okay. Verizon's already working.
Tuesday or the following Thursday. How this is.
Okay. Did you have so much like that?
Yeah. So he's still wide north. He's still higher than with wide north graduate. I know I'm here until right now.
A couple people coming up the bike, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, there's one. That's good.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting for March the 21st, 2023. To start the meeting, will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be aware this meeting is being live streamed on the Township YouTube channel, and the meeting may also be audio or video recorded by people present in the room. We start the meeting with public comment. Is there anyone attending who would like to raise an issue that is not on the agenda tonight, or who has a question or a comment for board or staff? Doug?
Good evening, everyone. Doug White, West Goshen. I just want to say, give a big thank you to Officer Ryan Kent, West Goshen Police Officers, Charlotte Taylor, and the Fellowship Ambulance at Chester County Hospital. It's one thing to talk about them in these meetings, it's another thing when they show up at your house and you need them. And I just wanted right here in West Goshen. So a lot of gems here in this township. And we got a good board of supervisors that's keeping it going. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Doug. Appreciate your comment. Anyone else with a comment or question? An issue? Very good. We'll move on to the next item of business, which is number 4 on the agenda, which is the presentation regarding an application before the Zoning Hearing Board for 929 South High Street at the Parkway Center.
Mr. Chairman, before the board this evening is an application that is coming before the Zoning Hearing Board for the redevelopment of certain portions of a property located at 929 South High Street. This is known as the Parkway Center. The property is located in the C1 Neighborhood Commercial Zoning District, and the applicant is proposing the demolition of a portion of the existing shopping center and the construction of a 6,049 square foot convenience store with the retail sale of gasoline. Convenience store is permitted by conditional use in the zoning district, and the retail sale of gasoline is included in the definition of convenience store in the township zoning ordinance. For the construction, they are seeking 4 variances before the zoning hearing board. I'll allow the applicant to go over those variances. And I have included a copy of the application in the packet for the board this evening. Our standard practice is to receive these applications by the first Monday of the month. However, given timing of the receipt and the nature of the application and coordination of schedules, the application is scheduled to be heard by the zoning hearing board on May 3rd, 2023, which is within the 60-day requirement under the municipalities planning code.
Thank you. Is there someone from the applicant's team that would be making a presentation? Hello? Would you, yes, come on up and introduce yourself, please.
Good evening, everyone. Allison, is it, can you hear me? Okay, I just want to make sure. Allison Zaro on behalf of the applicants, who are 929SH LLC and 929SH Realty Group LP. As Mr. Bayshore said, this proposal is a partial redevelopment of the Parkway Center. You'll see up on the screen the existing Parkway Center, which has its address and frontage on High Street. However, it also does have frontage on Route 202, and you will see the ramp that sort of cuts in front of the site. The corner piece that's not highlighted is not part of the Parkway Center. The applicants are proposing to redevelop a portion of the center that would involve the demolition of, I would say, a little more than half of the existing strip center that's on the site that you're seeing on this aerial, and the development of a Wawa or convenience store with fueling stations. We have submitted a zoning application, which is the piece that's before you tonight. As Mr. Bayshore said, the actual convenience store with fueling stations is permitted by conditional use on the property, so we are not seeking any use approval relief on the property. However, there are some variance requests. Specifically, the first one relates to the front yard setback. This property is bounded by multiple streets, as I pointed out, so it's essentially a corner lot. And one of the variance requests is specific to the dumpster that is proposed on the site. And our engineer that's here tonight will walk you through this. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of our relief that we're requesting, and then our engineer will walk you through the site plan. But there is a dumpster, and based on the location that you'll see when he walks you through the plan, we believe it makes sense to place it closer to Route 202 versus into the center of the site. Route 202 is up in grade from this property, and when you see that, that will make more sense. The second variance request relates to the size of the proposed building. The ordinance currently allows a convenience store of 5,500 square feet. We are proposing a store of 6,049 square feet. The ordinance that is in effect in your township is almost 20 years old, and as probably the board is aware, both the sort of the function and the needs of a convenience store have changed over time, including modern stores today have larger bathrooms, particularly in a Wawa setting. The older type of smaller store has a single user bathroom for the various locations, and the current stores have multiple bathrooms, so everyone's not standing around waiting for the bathroom. So that is one of the things versus just the internal functions of the store. There are 2 other items that are included in our variance application, and we are currently discussing them with the township in terms of legal interpretation. The property today is non-conforming as pertains to impervious coverage. It currently has 85.1% impervious coverage on the property. And the proposed development would reduce that impervious coverage to 76.5%. Similarly, you have a green area requirement. It's not conforming obviously to that today because it's not conforming to the impervious. The green area would actually be increased on the site as part of this redevelopment. So to the extent that area and bulk relief is needed for that versus carrying forward existing nonconformities, that has been included in our application. So it probably makes sense to have our civil engineer, Alex Peel, come up and give you a full overview of the proposal before we answer questions. I know I talked a lot without visuals, and I think it probably would be helpful for everybody to see those visuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
Good evening. My name is Alex Peel. I'm a principal with RGS Associates. We're a land planning civil engineering firm. As Allison noted, what's up on the screen currently is an aerial of the property. I'm assuming everybody is familiar with it, but always like to give orientation. So north-south street that with frontage is High Street. That is where the existing traffic signal that provides vehicular access into the site is located. On the angle left to right is 202, and as Allison noted, the property also fronts on 202 as well as the off-ramp coming onto the site. It's a little bit hard to see with some of the shadowing here, but the site is primarily impervious cover at this point between the existing paving and building area. The way the property functions now, access from High Street into the parking lot. If you're familiar with the center, there's not a lot of definition to the internal flow to the parking lot. It's a striped parking area without any islands associated with it. To the rear of the center, or the piece that fronts along 202 and the off-ramp, that's all the service area. So there's dumpster pads there, loading and unloading zones, and the point at which you'll see in the next slide that we're going to be reducing the center size to is right where there's a drive-through that runs through the building. So it's a covered drive-through. That's where the existing building would be basically cut back to allow for the proposed wall. If it's possible to go to the second exhibit, that would be great. Yep.
Do you need a pointer?
If you've got one, that'd be terrific.
You're welcome to use mine. If you want to help me. Thank you.
A little bit of a zoomed in view from the last slide, but the same orientation with High Street here on the left, 202 running on the angle here. Starting the existing features, the signalized intersection here would remain. To the north is an existing McDonald's. There's two parcels here. This is parcel 2 is where the existing center is, so that's the property that we're working within. To the right, this is the portion of the existing center that would remain. That existing drive-through, if you're familiar with it, runs right here, so it would be pulled back to that point in the center. The existing service area behind the existing building would remain, and that would connect into the service area and drive for the proposed Wawa. As you'll see on the graphic, obviously there's quite a bit more green associated with this plan than the current center. We would be creating islands in the parking lot for landscaping and also to define circulation within the pad area. The blue box here is the Wawa. Along High Street, this would be the proposed canopy with the 16 fueling stations. There would be adequate parking based on the ordinance provided for the Wawa, as well as adequate parking based on the current calculations for the center that would remain in the rest of the parking area. We have circulation around the canopy, obviously for both visitors and trucks, and deliveries to the Wawa with a delivery spot to the north there.
Where's the underground storage tanks going to be? The canopy?
Those would be right here in the corner. Oop, my mic's just giving up on me. There we go, right there.
Any space for electrical charging also?
I'm going to defer to Mike.
Maybe right now we'll just focus on the variance,
Okay.
the specific issues you're asking this board to kind of consider. And then
Okay.
after that, depending on how that conversation goes, we can talk about the ongoing land development processes of consideration.
Okay, some details there.
Thank you.
So, as I noted, the building is located here in the center. This is going to give up on me.
Shake.
Give it a shake. Yeah. And the dumpster is located here. So as Allison noted, that is located technically along the front yard on 202 right before the off-ramp, but is really in line with the current service area that's associated with the center and would be considered continued to be used to serve the proposed Wawa.
But is that, the concrete pads that have the existing trash receptacles on that, that's where they are too today, right? There's one behind Timothy's and there's another one down that service lane.
You're exactly correct. I believe if you overlaid them, one of the existing pads is just off of this location right here. So it's almost the exact same location, but those actually don't have enclosures that are associated with them. And if you click to the next slide. Please. Thank you. So this is just a section view that we prepared. So on the top, same site plan and orientation we've been looking at. Here is a section line that's looking to the east, and that's looking, cutting across here with the proposed Wawa aisle here, dumpster enclosure, and then the embankment up to 202. The existing elevation difference between the two is approximately 14 feet. So I think as Allison noted, with the topography difference, it's really going to sit down significantly below the roadway, which will help provide screening for it from that roadway. And again, this would be, as noted, in line with where the existing service and dumpster pads are for the center.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all.
Do the businesses back here receive like, deliveries and stuff through that service lane?
That's correct.
So, trucks would be coming through the Wawa parking lot to go back there?
That's correct.
No, just want to make sure that's understood, obviously.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, no, that's a good point. So there'd be two access points into the Wawa area here, but yes, that connection point noted here where the existing service area is, and this connection would continue to provide access.
What size trucks go down there? How do they get back out? Is there an exit on the other end of the existing?
No, it's if you don't mind clicking back to the aerial. At the end, it's a little hard to see here, but there's a little bit larger paved area back here. Yeah, where the trucks would turn around at the end of the service drive.
They're smaller trucks. So they're relatively small trucks, they're not.
Yeah, I think mostly box trucks that are servicing that part.
Yeah,
of the
any
center.
18-wheelers mostly for Colonial,
Yeah.
back into their front door early in the morning.
Yeah. We would obviously, as part of the land development plan, provide turning movements for all those areas. As part of the variance plan set that was submitted, we did provide a turning template for the fueling trucks. That would be the last page in that set. Just showing, the access off of High Street and how those can circulate around to the tanks that we were discussing that are here and around the canopy and circulating back out of the Wawa area. Any questions?
Any stormwater engineering practices going to be considered on the property?
Yes, we haven't gotten that far yet in the process, so we'll have to evaluate that. We understand, obviously, the municipality has its stormwater ordinances as well as the state code that we would be held to, so that will be certainly part of the land development process.
Could you go back to that slide which shows the proposed layout of
The cross-section or not?
well, the one, yeah, that one there. So just for clarification, this area here in green will become green space?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
and that's, right now, that's impervious? for the most
That's
part?
paved all the way up to the road.
Okay, so what you're proposing then is to add all this then?
Yes,
Okay,
I mean, there is some green buffer, right? It's not, I don't believe it's on the other side of the property line, right there.
right along
That
here.
exists already.
Yeah, actually that embankment that's shown in the cross section, but you can see the trees along here. But if you zoom into this area, it's actually paved really, I think, all the way up to the street.
There's a little green on the corner. There's a little planting bed.
Is there a little,
Yeah, right.
little guy right there?
Yeah.
Okay. So we would be certainly adding quite a bit more green space to the property as part of this project.
Are we at a place where we're talking about traffic yet?
Maybe just keep on these 4 variances that they've kind of highlighted today, and then we'll come back to kind of land development issues.
Because you guys have a conditional use hearing as well.
Yeah.
That's correct.
This use is conditional use. So the
So-
first step is get zoning, second conditional use, then land development.
So the 4 variances we're discussing tonight are, one is this dumpster location of being within the site, this distance that's kind of confusing because it's like 2 front yards, etc. The second one is the size of the actual Wawa. So is this 6,049 feet, is that a standard design now for Wawa? Or is it sort of bigger than normal, smaller than normal?
Mike, can I defer to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Mike is with Wawa and can speak in more detail.
Want me to come up there, or?
No, it's fine.
Is
Can
there
you say
a-
your name, please?
Yeah, Mike Spiegel.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So the store that we're looking to do here is our typical store. It's a store that we're building today in several locations, not just in this state, but in several states. Some of our other stores that we have in the township are older models. So we have some issues, as Allison had mentioned, there's the bathrooms and some other things. So this store is our newest, not newest, is our current prototype. We have a larger prototype that started to come into play, but for this particular site, we actually did not choose to do that here. We went down to our current model, which handles a lot of our current offerings, the bathroom situation, all the ADA requirements that we need for our stores, ample room for everybody, including all of our patrons, our delivery consultants, our vendors, and our associates.
I presume if this facility was to go ahead, you would exit the lease on the Wawa that's a couple of...
So that store, which has been around since 1968, typical of our older legacy stores, parking is a hazard, I would say. Even though once people are into the store, it seems to be great, but even inside a store, it's cozy. It's a lot, for the most part. But we've been looking to try to relocate that store for several years. This opportunity came up. But yes, our intent is to close that store. It's store 25. So I guess it's one of our older stores.
Do you own that though?
That store is a lease store.
Oh, it is leased, okay.
Store 25?
Store 25. We have 1,000 stores now in our...
It's like historical.
We can't keep the store number, unfortunately. We had the same issue when we had store 1 closed.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Yep, absolutely.
So the other 2 variances were related to impervious coverage and green area. So there was a comment made that there's a conversation with staff happening about these particular issues. Is there some additional information the board should be aware of?
Well, so they were making the argument that there's an existing non-conforming condition on the site today, and that they're making that existing non-conformity be decreased with this proposed redevelopment. So non-conformities, there's a lot of different ways to go about interpreting them. One approach is say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But what they're doing is that they're creating another condo lot. So McDonald's is 1 condo unit, and the site that you see here with the shopping center is 1 condo unit. They'll make another condo unit out of what will be the Wawa area. So there's another interpretation. You could say, well, no, you're actually creating a whole other use with a whole other lot.
although it's a condo lot, condo unit, and therefore you're starting fresh, and that you should be looking at it as that new lot has to comply with whatever the max impervious cover and max green space. The problem with that interpretation is that there was a prior application where the James Chevrolet was redeveloped at 5 Points Road in Westchester Pike, where that same situation, the existing James Chevrolet site was non-conforming with respect to, I think, impervious cover, might have been green area
It
too.
was green area and there were some setbacks as well.
And in that application, they did the same thing. The owner of the property brought it through subdivision land development, there was also conditional use for the uses, but in that instance, the township accepted an interpretation that you could have, as long as you were decreasing the nonconformity with the redevelopment proposal, you could, again, you're looking at it as an overall lot, even though there are condo units, that as you were decreasing those existing nonconformities, that you didn't need a variance. So we're just evaluating whether or not that case, is similar enough, and, like I said, nonconformities, there's millions of cases that deal with it and how to address it. A lot of it depends upon the language of your ordinance. And if you've ever taken a look at your non-conforming section of your zoning ordinance, it's rather complex. You have to know if the use is non-conforming, if the lot is non-conforming, if the structure is non-conforming. And based on all that, it tells you what you can and can't do. So it requires further dialogue and conversation. And we also did not have the opportunity to have a zoning officer review it with Jamie leaving and the new zoning officer coming in. So we obviously want to have that conversation.
So the example you gave, is that the only one that's prior to this situation?
That's the one I'm aware of where the non-conformity condition existed. You do have the alley development, which you do allow, and that's a different zoning district and a different use, but you do allow, for purposes of determining area and bulk requirements, maximum impervious cover, green area, to look at it as a track site, as an overall track. You're not looking at the alley unit, you're not looking at the Popeyes unit and saying, does it meet your impervious cover? And there is an ordinance section that allows them to do it, provided that there's basically a declaration recorded that treats it like a unified development. But I'm not aware of other developments where there was an existing non-conforming condition and a redevelopment came in and we acknowledged that that could continue as long as it was decreased. I mean, I've seen that before in throughout my practice. I mean, it's not an unreasonable interpretation, because at the end of the day, your situation is getting improved.
Yeah.
As far as green space and impervious cover, but again, a lot of it's driven by the language in the ordinance.
So the zoning board would be tasked with the job of trying to figure all that out.
Right, but I think it's important first to have your zoning officer. That is the person who under law is given the first opportunity to make a determination. So you want your zoning officer to render an interpretation, evaluate the application and determine whether they agree that that's the appropriate way to go. If they disagree with the zoning officer's interpretation, then yes, we go to the zoning hearing board, who will ultimately decide who's right, who's wrong. But we don't even have that initial determination yet.
Yeah. And we may not have it for a little while, too.
No, we will. We're setting up a meeting. Yep, we have somebody lined up and we're trying to set up a meeting. So we will have that. Definitely, we need that before the hearing.
Yeah, so either way, so as, not having an answer at this point in time, we included that as a variance request to the extent that we need it. But ultimately, the bigger picture on the site is that we will be decreasing the overall impervious and increasing the green area on the site.
So to that bigger picture question, maybe this is a question for Brian. So do we expect during the land development process that we would see stormwater requirements improve, the stormwater management improve significantly, or is it going to be small changes and not much?
The ordinance requires, since they're redeveloping, to consider the site as 40% meadow, where it's basically 100% impervious now. In existing conditions, and proposed conditions would be what is proposed after they go through their conditional use and their zoning to get the layout. And then there they have to then design stormwater to meet the requirements of the ordinance.
Okay, could you guess what that might look like?
Most likely in this instance, it's probably going to be an underground system.
Okay.
There isn't room above ground to provide above ground systems on this property, so they're going to be doing something.
So that ultimately would be an enhancement compared to what exists today, right? Because there isn't that kind of capability.
I don't know if there's anything on the site today for an existing stormwater system. My guess is there's probably not. So.
And Brian, can I ask a question? I mean, I think they can't have their cake and eat it too. So if they're asking you to look at the totality of the site for impervious cover and green area, then you're going to have to look at the totality of the site for stormwater management. Does that make sense?
The ordinance is written on the regulated activity, which is the area of disturbance.
So
NPDS may look at it differently, but the ordinance looks at it as regulated activity, which is the area being disturbed. So it would be the area, the way the ordinance is currently written, the area they'd be responsible for is everything you see that's in color. That's the area, everything they touch to change elevation. If there's any grading that goes outside that to tie back into the parking lot, that area has to be considered in the stormwater design.
Well, that being said, Brian, is there enough room for underground stormwater management engineering practices? Because the area is small, you're going to have underground storage tanks there. Is it feasible to have?
There's setback requirements in the ordinance they have to meet for stormwater, of how close they can put it to certain buildings or other structures on the property or the property line. So they're going to have to meet the ordinance. They may have to look at going potentially somewhere into the additional part of the shopping center if they need to expand it.
That's what I was thinking,
That's
because
a
it's a
design.
small area.
That's an engineering design that they're going to have to deal with.
Right.
Will that be a part of the unit of the shopping center, or is that a common area?
That area he's just referring to, which is
This
north-
area of the parking
north
lot
of-
up here.
Yeah. Because I'm just thinking with your stormwater practices that you're going to need, I thought it was the entire property you needed to engineer it for, but it looks like it's just where the area is going to be disturbed, and now you're going to have enough area for your stormwater engineering practices to meet the requirements.
Yeah, and as Brian noted, I mean, that's what we'd have to evaluate. The area that he indicated on the plan would be the first place we'd look at to see if the volume that could be accommodated there would be enough to meet the requirements. There's all different types of underground systems with different levels of capacity to them. Some that run up into the 90% range, depending on the system, and down to just a stone bed that's about 40% volume. So, so there's a lot of different options as to what you can look at, for how you approach that.
Other questions from the board? Specific to the variances, we can kind of close that out and maybe talk about some of the land development issues the board typically likes to weigh in on. Anything on there of those 4 variances?
I would think it'd just be neutral.
Okay, so we're going to let the process keep going with
Yep.
staff's conversation.
Under the
So,
development and others.
So the board is not going to send the solicitor to oppose the application.
as far as what I'm hearing.
Yep, that is what I'm hearing as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before you go, we just, since you're here and we're here, one of the things we like to talk about during land development is certain things the board is favored towards, and those are things that to do with, advancing sustainability concepts in the township. I certainly think it fits with the Wawa model. Some of the things we've talked about when we see commercial redevelopments are landscaping design, not just, some grass and some firs. We want to kind of, what is it that can be more in keeping with what we see in terms of a more sustainable landscaping design of native plants. We don't have a design standard or anything else to offer, but we do have some people on our sustainability committee that are very happy to have conversations and offer some potential designs or suggestions. Also, EV charging, hopefully it's part of Wawa's model. We're trying to certainly advance here at the municipal complex EV charging for transition of our municipal fleet over the next few years. I would expect and hope that this design at least would be able to accommodate multiple EV charging as something that would be advantageous to the model of this particular location and where a gas station may end up in the future. And anything to do with the solar generation, whether that's on a canopy or on a roof of a building, we just want to encourage people to think about that. And, we have a lot of use here probably for generated power, so just some thoughts as you go through a design phase and bring it forward through land development. We don't have these things necessarily built into our ordinances in terms of requirements, but we certainly want you to encourage you to think about them.
And if I can add to that also, solar panels installed on the roof. I believe there's EV charging stations being installed now at the 5 points in Route 3 lava location?
They're operating now.
Yeah, so that's becoming more and more of your standard model, I presume?
We actually don't determine where they put it. Like, for instance, there it's Teslas that are there. We deal with other vendors also, but Tesla's probably the majority of it. They will dictate where they go. They do their own permitting. They do their own electric connection. We provide spots at all of our sites for them if they choose to go there. I mean, they look at, what the population of Teslas in the area are. As you mentioned, on a 5 Points Road, we just installed Teslas there. We have Teslas now probably at about 130 of our stores, I think we're up to now. And that number is growing pretty rapidly.
But were they ready, like with conduits to support the electric?
We do. We try to where we can. I mean, the store over in 5 Points was built well before. I mean, that was when the Pope came here, like 2015 or 2016. So I don't think we were putting conduits in. I think we had to dig through some of the asphalt in order to put the conduits in there. Although I think the location where the transformer went was favorable.
You're saying with this model, you probably
we would run the conduits underneath. Yes.
Awesome.
I'm just curious what size your underground storage tanks are and how many?
So the ones that are proposed here, we have 2 of the tanks are dual tanks, or 22,000 gallon tanks.
Okay.
And then the one that's situated there in the middle is a 20,000 gallon tank. Pretty typical of all of our stores.
And you have a manifold?
They are all fiberglass double lined. So they have a brine solution in between, which has a sensor to it. So if there's any leak whatsoever, that space there sets off alarms both at the store and at our corporate office.
Residential properties on the other side. Are there residential properties on the other side of High Street right here?
Yeah, right across from the ramp. A little over from the driveway where the ramp comes in. I believe there's houses this way.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm sort of foreseeing is that so parking lots for convenience stores and gas stations are usually very bright, at least from what I've noticed. There might be some complaints about that. I don't really know. I mean, I'm sure you comply with our lighting ordinances, but the other sort of part of sustainability and the direction that I think we want to move in as a township is what can we look at as far as lighting control, and instead of having lights that, sort of shine everywhere, maybe have downward focusing, lights, and maybe you could use this store as a new sort of model in that way.
Well, these are issues that we all deal with under the conditional use process. Once we get
Just
to
throwing it
that
out
point.
there.
Yeah, but you hear it tonight and, 2 months or 3 months or whatever it is from now. So. Any other issues or things on the board's mind that we should share? Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is item number 5, which is discussion and possible awarding of the contract to the Balmore Street Culvert Replacement Project. And I believe Chris Peterson from Carroll Engineering is with us. Hi, Chris.
Good evening, everybody.
And let's see, Chris, do you want to introduce the background to this and where we are with the outcome of the bid process?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So before the board this evening, are the bid results and a recommendation on the awarding of the contract for the Balmore Street Culvert Replacement Project. This project was allocated in the 2023 budget in the American Rescue Fund. This line item contained, and I outlined the line item in the budget, which contains all the township's allocated stormwater projects, including of which this project represents 34% of the allocation. We did open the bids on February 21st, and there were 5 bids that were received as follows. The apparent low bidder is G&B Construction in the amount of $836,905. This is a 43% increase over the original cost estimate for the project. Mr. Peterson did outline in his recommendation letter the results of the bids and sort of why he feels that the increase was seen, primarily due to increases in labor and material costs that were unforeseen at the time the budgetary estimate was put together. We did We did have Dave Woodward, our Public Works Director, and Mark Bertolami, our Street Superintendent, evaluate the results, and they did provide some notes on those to the Board of Supervisors for your consideration. Even with the cost increase, there is adequate fund availability in the American Rescue Fund for the project. However, we would have to have other projects be reevaluated, specifically the Andrew Drive project, which was approximately $700,000 of that budget. In analyzing the American Rescue Fund budget, we have about $2.1 million as of the end of February in that fund. Those funds do need to be allocated by the end of 24 and spent by the end of 2026. So assume with total year spent is about $38,000 out of that fund. So assuming that we're able to move some of these projects down to future years, we'd be looking at a year-end balance of just over $1 million in that fund, assuming the Andrews Drive project will be shifted to a future year. And as Mark and David pointed out in their analysis, there is some work on that project that we feel we can do in-house to reduce the cost and the scope of that work. So at that point, I will turn it over to Chris. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that covers it. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you relative to the project or anything that was in my letter recommendation to folks.
Yeah, I'll kick it off, Chris. I have a question. So the bids that we got that came in higher than you anticipated based on the engineering estimates, is this of a scale that's unique to this project, or are you seeing it on other projects for other townships, that the scale of over the estimate in terms of what you're receiving in terms of bids is typical at this point in time?
Unfortunately, from my standpoint, we found a lot of projects have been quite a bit more than the estimate. Than this particular project, I'd say this was on the lower side.
So 43% increase over an engineering estimate is...
I mean, some as high as 3 times higher than what we've estimated.
Wow.
And there's other, it's different work, so it's more complicated than just comparing apples to apples here, but we have seen prices increase across the board. We're all seeing what's going on with inflation right now, and unfortunately it disproportionately affects some industries over others. Groceries, I would say, I'm not seeing a 6.5% increase. I'm seeing things cost 2 times, maybe 3 times more. So we're also seeing that in the construction industry too. And that's guided by a number of things. You've got equipment costs that are going up. You've got gasoline costs that have gone up. Funding projects and the financing that goes along with that has gone up. There's a labor shortage in the construction industry as well. So allocating the right employees to do these projects has also affected construction estimates negatively, I would say. So no, I would not say this is atypical for what we've seen in the industry.
Thank you. Other questions, Chris?
Hey, Chris, I have a question. I know S&B was the lowest bidder, but looking at the breakdown on it, it looks as if they're higher on some other issues by considerably. Like the temporary crosswalk, they're charging $16,000, and the average is about 10. There's some about 8. So I noticed a lot of individual items are a lot higher, even though they're the lowest bidder. So just wondering why, and if we can go back and maybe look at those individual items that are way above what the average is, and see if we can lower some of them. The other one was the safety fencing.
You can't negotiate with them. We have to take the bid as it comes in. I mean, I don't think it matters necessarily, because at the end of the day, they're doing it for that price. How they want to allocate that price is up to them. That's all you're paying. You're not paying them a penny more unless obviously there's a change order that's necessitated, but
Yeah.
Right, so
you
some of the items
can't
that
go
they
back
may
and
be low
negotiate with
on,
any bidder.
some of the items they may be low on, they might have that funding in another line item, basically, something for.
Is the money that we're supposed to be reimbursed from Aqua of a set dollar amount? There's no chance that that could fluctuate up or down?
There would be minor fluctuations depending on the actual quantity of pipe that's been installed. I mean,
Did that share go up 43% as well?
Actually, we should go back to them, and I don't know how we wrote it. If we wrote it, it should be based on the actual cost that we have to pay for it, right?
it is.
Yeah.
And we had put in an estimate in the agreement for $119,000. I believe the aqua work came in at around $74,000 for this particular project.
So when you say so who estimated that?
We estimated that work.
So
based on
the cost
approximately-
of the job, why can't we say it's not the estimate that you have, it's not the right cost to do the job? We need whatever it is that G&B Construction is going to charge for that particular part of the job.
Because there might be minor field adjustments where you have to add an additional 5 feet of pipe, let's say. So we might have to pay an additional quantity of 5 feet on water main that's being installed, and then we would do a quantity adjustment at the end of the job. But I think there's enough wiggle room there with what we had estimated and what's in the agreement and where the prices actually came in at.
So you're saying what was estimated is what we're going to charge other than any field adjustments on actual length of pipe?
But it's based on the quantity on the bid.
I'm sorry, for the actual.
Right, that was a line item on the bid, wasn't it? So you've got the estimate on the bid. Despite what we just talked about, how some parts of the bid can be absorbing other parts of the cost, right?
Right, and on the bid tabulation, I actually highlighted the items that was reimbursed by Township for blue, just for your information.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Chris, this is a front and center project now for us, and we've been talking about it for a couple of years now. Can you talk a little bit about what is the immediate need that's driving the necessity for us to move ahead on this project?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So there's a number of issues going on with this particular crossing. For one, it's in an area that's been identified to flood pretty regularly. And upon field inspection, you can see why. So there's a little picture here of pipe that's actually crossing the road. So there's actually a smaller pipe that's been sleeved in a larger steel pipe at a certain point. I think that's approximately a quarter of the way across the roadway there. And that's just a big block of concrete, holding those two pipes together right now. Not an ideal flow situation there by any means.
So that's actually causing a restriction in the flow.
It is causing a restriction, right. So that is affecting capacity as well. It's anybody's guess as to what the age of this is, but I would say that it's held up relatively well based on the amount of cover that's over it. So on the one side, there's about 6 inches of cover over the steel pipe. On the downstream side, there's about 3 inches, I would say. And
3 inches?
Yes, and just based on the amount of traffic we see with the Dewey Pile facility back there, I think it's a testament to actually this pipe that it's lasted this long.
Well, just stop me for a second. Is there a possibility, say with the 100-year storm, which we seem to be having every other year now, this thing could get washed out?
I think that's a very real possibility. I was able to share with Brian a map of the 100-year floodplain in this area, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. The little blue circle in the middle is the crossing. So, I mean, you can see that this is all within a floodplain area. So what we've done here is we've tried to obviously improve the situation. We have about 3 times more capacity going in with the new twin pipes than is there now. So there's that. There's also the matter of the safety improvements that are being done at the same time, which I think is important to touch on here. It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a fatality at this crossing having to do with the Dewey Pile folks crossing at this particular crossing. So as part of this project, we're also trying to improve safety for those folks trying to make it across here. If you're not familiar with this culvert crossing, the crosswalk goes across at about a 45-degree angle. Not ideal, typically you want to cross perpendicularly. This project will realign that crosswalk. It'll also be adding safety improvements like guide rail. It'll relocate some existing flashing warning devices for those pedestrians to use. So I think that's also going to be a great improvement there, and also, reduce any chance of another instance of something like that happening.
Okay. How long will this project, if we approve it to move forward, once it gets started, how long is it going to take for it to be completed?
That's a little dependent upon the lead time for the materials. We kind of expect those to take a little bit longer right now. But if memory serves, it's a 150-day contract.
And how long do you think Baltimore Street will have to be shut down during that period of time?
Approximately that length of time. We've already been towards the Dewey Pile. I guess that's another thing to touch on too. Dewey Pile really wants to see this project happen, just based on the amount of traffic that's going through there, right? We have an easement agreement in place with them, and we've also arranged, in coordination with Dewey Pyle, having a temporary facility where the folks that are normally crossing the roadway there are going to be using a different facility up the road. They've gone as far as to construct a temporary access for those employees to use that too. So they're operating under, you know, the assumption that the township's going to go ahead with this project. I think it's fair to say that they want to see it happen.
And there's detour plans in place for the traffic because of the road closure. They work through all that. Township.
The detour plan is fairly extensive.
Other questions?
The one, just Sean, on your first question, I know the Borough of Westchester awarded a bid at their last meeting, and it came in double what they anticipated. And there were a lot of questions about how that happened, and some of the same reasons that Chris outlined. The labor costs they found that to be one of the most significant factors in rising bids.
Chris Bayshaw, so this project, if we go ahead as is going to eat up about $250,000 more than anticipated out of the American Rescue Fund plans that we had.
Correct.
We talked about just moving Andrews Drive back out of the current year, maybe doing some of the work on that project with in-house staff. So it'll save a little bit of money, but it won't save $250,000 on that project. So the net effect of all this is we'll have less money left at the end of the day when those two projects are done in the American Rescue Plan Fund that was anticipated to maybe $200,000, which is less money we would have to spend on CMP work that we know we need to address.
That's correct. That's correct. If you spent so if everything came in per budget, you had $1.4 million in expenses budgeted. So you would have ended the year with just over $700,000. So with this project, you're probably actually closer to $300,000 to $400,000 if you did the Andrew Drive project as well. So if you move that and reduce the scope with Mark and his team, you could probably realize you could probably get a little bit closer, but you know you're not going to make up that entire 250.
Thanks.
Do we see the cost increasing even more between the time now we start the project? And I'm just looking for any surprises when we see out of this, potentially.
I would say the scope's pretty well spelled out. Usually when we approach a project like this, we don't necessarily expect that we're going to have to relocate utilities like a water line or a sanitary sewer. We already knew at the onset of this project we were going to have to do those things to accommodate the larger pipe size. So those items that may have normally come up as a change order have already been accounted for in this bid. We feel we've appropriately coordinated with PECO, who has there's high voltage power lines on that portion of the roadway there. It just so happens that there's an emergency shut off on either side of this crossing, so it seems relatively straightforward that we're going to be able to de-energize if we have to, if there's any sort of crane work that needs to happen with the head walls and whatnot. So obviously change orders can come about with the project, but we think that anything major has already been done with the initial design.
I have another question, Chris. Under the second-class township code, we're required by law to take the lowest responsible bidder, but we don't have to take any bidder. We could rebid this project. What, in your estimation, would be the correct path to go? Should we rebid this, or should we basically go with what we have?
It's our experience with a variety of projects that typically when you go back and try to rebid something with equal scope, or even say you reduce the scope a little bit, say 10 or 20%, we often find that bids come in around the same price, if not higher in most cases. This is because the contractors already know who else is bidding on the project. They know how much money they may have left on the table if they're the low bidder, and they'll make adjustments accordingly.
The cat's already out of the bag, in other words. Everybody can look at those numbers.
It's unfortunate, but that is the trend typically when we rebid projects.
Okay.
And we looked at trying to reduce scope on this project, what really here could be trimmed out, and I really think you would diminish the project and what it's trying to accomplish, which is reducing flooding, improving safety, improving circulation for some of these places back there if you were to reduce the scope. One of those scope reductions we looked at was all right, maybe we just replace the pipe in kind. Well, what does that really do for us? We know we have a flooding issue here. What are we really fixing other than just replacing something that's already deficient in terms of its ability to, convey the flow that gets there?
And one of the other conversations we had when the results came in back in February was, can we, eliminate something in the scope and do that in-house? And ultimately we determined that wasn't going to be a significant cost savings.
Chris, can you just re-articulate what the improvement will be in terms of the capability of the culvert to handle the stormwater flows, in terms of what it is today versus what it will be with the new twin culvert?
Sure. We put together some flow calculations for the new pipe and the existing pipe. That's a little bit nuanced because I will say that the other issue with the existing pipe is that our field survey would seem to indicate it has a negative slope at this point. So typically when you do a flow calculation, flow is driven by it having positive slope. So that's kind of out the window, so we had to make certain assumptions and just try to form a comparison of what the existing is versus the new. So we assume the existing pipe, instead of having a negative slope, now has 1%, which is what we're putting back in with the twin elliptical pipes. When you compare those two together, the existing pipe conveys approximately 140 CFS before the roadway tops. The new twin elliptical pipes will have approximately 3 times more than that at 426 CFS. So it would definitely be a vast improvement.
Even having said that, our expectation is we know that new state is still only good for a 10-year rain event, storm event. And to John's point, we have experiencing more than that in this township.
And if you had all the money in the world to put in exactly what you wanted here, I don't know that it would be advisable to go above a 10-year storm based on the map that we're looking at today. If you're already in an inundated floodplain area and the roadway is shown to flood on this map here, you would have to recontour the whole road at the same time that you're doing the culvert replacement to really get an improvement and bring that roadway up out of the floodplain. So I think 10-year makes sense in this instance. You've got a stream coming to and from this existing culvert that's approximately 5 feet wide. If you were trying to size for the 100-year storm, you'd be looking at something that's 25, 30 feet wide. It just doesn't make sense from a practical standpoint either. So I think in meeting the PennDOT requirements for a local road for a 10-year storm conveyance, we sort of had to weigh things out, and this was part of our original discussion with Rick Gregg. He was in agreement at the time. I don't want to speak for him, but this seemed to be a happy place to end up and one that made sense for this particular location.
Since we're going with the 10-year storm versus 100-year storm, I understand your engineering practices by doing that. Would we still have some amount of flooding in that area?
For a 100-year storm, it is plausible. I don't know how much of this inundated area is just because of this existing pipe being undersized. We've not completed an all-encompassing hydraulic study to be able to determine that, but just based on purely flow rates, it is plausible that there could still be flooding in the roadway for the larger storms, anything in excess of.
Right, and that's what I was referring to.
Right.
I've seen it crest once and it was very bad. It was pretty ugly.
Just once with the existing system.
Probably like 100 feet on each side, the rest of it.
Wow.
I would say his observation is pretty much in agreement with that, Matt. There's approximately 100 feet on either side of the crossing there that the floodplain extends to, which could be the green area.
Other questions from the board? Okay, is someone on the board willing to make a motion to approve the bid from G&B Construction in the amount of $836,905 for the Colmar Street culvert replacement project?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any board questions on the motion? Any public comment or questions on the motion? Okay, ready to take a vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Thanks, Chris.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, agenda item number 6 is discussion and possible approval of a proposal from Bartlett Tree Experts for work on the historic weeping beech tree at 910 Old Fairhill Road. Chris?
Mr. Chairman, before the board this evening is a proposal from Bartlett Tree Experts for work on the work associated with the historic weeping beech tree on Old Fernhill Road. The board did recently approve an easement to the property owner that does provide the township with access to do maintenance on the tree. The total cost of the proposal is $4,178, with the proposed work including soil care and fertilization as well as pest management. The Sustainability Advisory Committee reviewed this proposal at their meeting on February 28th, recommended its approval. I'm recommending that the cost be allocated between the Sustainability Advisory Committee's 2023 budget allocation as well as the Parks Department's operating expenses allocation, which includes tree work, so it would be separated by just under $2,100 per category.
Would that leave about $1,000 left in the SAC budget?
The SAC has not spent anything from their budget, but I know they do have. I knew they do have projects outlined for this year. It would leave.
I think we had 5,000 initially, didn't we?
Correct. It would leave about, knowing what they have planned, 1,100 plus 2,000. It would leave just under $2,000 in their line item for the remainder of the year. That's a question for the board. We allocated $10,000 towards operating expenses in the Parks Department budget, which included tree care. I know from talking to Dave that Doreen's crew has a lot of tree work scheduled for this year. So I was trying to look at a way to, share the cost burden, so to speak, between both entities. But if the board wishes to authorize this proposal, we could always take it out of one line item with knowing that it's going to go over budget.
I guess my feeling would be that we should have it come out of the parks budget.
Yeah.
To me, the SAC budget is like, what special projects do we want them to work on in a given year? And either they spend it on something or they don't. Versus if we've got, now that we've got to this point with this tree, any kind of ongoing need to sustain, maintain, help it flourish should just kind of come out of our regular parks budget.
Yeah, we ever spend money
That's
on
my
stuff
view.
like Arbor Day and the bags, reusable bags, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
SAC.
Yeah, I agree, and I think this is a maintenance sort of issue, and I wouldn't have a problem with it coming out of the parks.
I mean, it probably won't be this amount every year, but every other year there might be some tree.
Well, the
The original proposal
I
was
remember that, like 5 grand a year, right?
the original proposal was roughly $30,000, and I advised the SAC that in order to do that proposal, based on the guidance from our solicitors, that would have to be bid out through the appropriate bidding process.
And we didn't have time because the tree's in dire condition right now.
So the SAC did go back and say what needs to be done now, and that's where this proposal came from.
So is this proposal a one-time deal, a one-time treatment?
Correct.
Not a recurring one?
No, not a recurring one. But, and then again, as long as the board, we can take it out of the Parks Department budget, but as long as the board understands that, that line will probably go over budget just because of the work that the work has.
So what happens in future years? Let's say we do this year, and it's great. What happens in 2024? Who says what's needed to keep sustaining, maintaining this tree?
I believe that the plan was to stay in touch with, utilize Bartlett, to stay in touch with them and see kind of what was needed on a year-to-year basis. Then we can factor that into our budget.
Yeah,
So parks really should, in 2024, should budget some kind of placeholder for some potential spend on this.
We can even actually create its own line item within the budget, and that way it's allocated separately. Because it's not really a park, so to speak, in the sense that it's not land that the township owns, but it is stuff that we can maintain. So maybe it might make sense to make it its own sort of category, or expand on, since it's an initiative of the SAC, maybe expand the SAC's budget and include this as, as a subcategory within there.
Yeah, I would assume this is the last time this tree's going to be treated at all.
So there was actually like another tree, like a twin tree, that just died last week.
Next to it.
No, at Longwood. That was like the.
And that's the other thing, I thought Longwood gave us the right to this property to maintain the tree in the lease agreement.
There's definitely restrictions in documents that have not been upheld by anybody. As far as whoever was the owner of the property required to maintain the tree, and if not, it reverted back to the township, to the private owner.
Okay.
But that hadn't been enforced any time through the deeds.
Okay.
So Do you guys have, I mean, I know this just sounds out there, but maybe put in your newsletter if there's anybody in the township that has an arborist or has experience. I mean, Berg is a lot of their tree commission, they just expanded it to 7 members, and they have residents that have expertise and experience. Maybe in your larger population, you have people that are willing to, you know, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, I have no idea if there's anybody, but it's worth looking into.
Once a volunteer.
Especially with such a historic tree, it might be something they could, you know, tout as their, you know, they're helping their community by keeping this amazing tree alive.
Put the word out.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can convince them to join the SAC at the
Right.
same time. Double whammy.
Okay, so any other questions from the board? Okay, would someone like to make a motion
I will make that motion,
to,
hire Bartlett tree experts to take care of the historic weeping beech tree for $4,178.
and for the money to come from
Money to come from the
Parks?
Parks Department.
Okay, I'll second that. Is there any board questions on the motion? Is there any public comments or questions? Yes.
Out of curiosity, do we know the lifespan of these trees? Like what the average life is? Is there someone along with it that would be willing to go out as an arborist, just as a public service? Since there's one that just died recently, that's a lot of, I mean, obviously it's better than 30,000 what we were saying before. But I guess my concern is, and obviously, yes, preservation is ideal and key, but I guess as a person out looking, here I am sitting here. I've always done my own landscaping, so I know a fair amount about trees. And there's more research to be done, I feel. I'm not saying you don't spend the $4,000. I think that's an excellent idea for a start. But if this other one died recently, maybe they are, if they're in it for life, and there's somebody along with that expertise that would be able to get a little more insight. You know, yes, try the treatment, but at the same time looking towards the future. You know, what's the lifespan? How much money is going to continue to be put into a tree that might only have another 5 or 10 years to live?
That's a good point.
Very good point.
And I'm not saying that preservation is important, because I'm all about trees and wildlife and all the things that are, you know, living within there, and hawks and birds and things that are also definitely drawn into that tree and come back and migrate. So I'm thinking big picture. But,
I'm sorry, what was your name again, please?
Megan McCory, I'm on the Civic Association.
Thank you.
I would think that Bartlett tree experts, they should give us some idea on the lifespan of these trees
It
and
doesn't hurt
condition.
to have a second opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think a second opinion from the disinterested party would be good. So one would be good if we could find someone.
Well, we have
Or
a lot of
others.
expertise on our SAC too, but maybe the
Right, but if Longwood's been dealing with almost the exact same tree at the exact same age and they just lost it, they might have some feedback.
insight.
It's a really good idea.
Or be able to come out and look and say, we knew our tree only had so long. Looking at yours, it was exactly the same. There could be some sort of a fungus or something that came in and affected it as well. You know, we've had all kinds of interesting things, but warming is definitely taking a toll on trees and affecting a lot of them. I know oaks recently have seen some issues, and a lot of the older oaks have passed because of fungus. So I'm just putting out there, it could be something we don't know about. But it's being missed.
So looking to our liaisons to the SAC, you're going to take that to the SAC, is it?
Absolutely.
Yep.
For sure.
Thank you for your feedback. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments on the motion? Okay, I'm ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next is agenda item number 7. Discussion and possible adoption of ordinance number 4, 2023, amending chapter 57, the Parks and Recreation Areas of the West Goshen Township Code of Ordinances. I think of Kristen.
Yes, we talked about this at your last meeting, and we made some changes, amendments. This came about from David Doreen indicating that the park rules for the skate park and the dog park were outdated and didn't really have an appropriate time for the skate park, or dog park, excuse me, to be closed for maintenance. So had asked me to amend, those are exhibits to Exhibit A and Exhibit B. There were some comments at the last meeting, we did make those changes, and we did add a prohibition of vaping. That's the first section of the code. That wasn't in the first draft that you saw. So now, in addition to no smoking, vaping is also not prohibited. So 3 sections. The first is to add the vaping as a prohibition in all parks. Second is to amend the rules for the skate park, and the third is to amend the rules for the dog park. We did advertise tonight's hearing in the Daily Local on March 13th, 2023, and we also sent a copy of the ordinance for public inspection on March 8th of 2023.
In the ordinance, do we need to say, or is it assumed, because we're in West Goshen, smoking and vaping shall be prohibited in all West Goshen parks instead of in the parks?
Well, if you read all of Chapter 57, it's very clear you're talking about, you have to read the sections of Chapter 57 prior to it. This is just one section, but if you look at Chapter 57, it's very clear you're talking about the West Goshen parks. Yeah.
Chris, on the ordinance, looks like the exhibits are flipped between Section 2 and Section 3. So the actual language says Exhibit A for the skate park. And it's the dog park is Exhibit A. The skate park is
Well, that's
Exhibit
good,
B.
because I didn't put the exhibit that tabs on there. That must have been a general code thing, because these came
Yeah, I have it
from
right.
the general code. I don't know if he has dog park.
A is dog park,
Yeah,
B
it's
is
dog
skate park. What do you have?
The actual ordinance, the ordinance language states that A is the skate park and the dog park is B.
You can
Yeah, you can just change it. That's
Yeah,
easy enough.
signature page
Yeah,
on the second
easy
page.
enough.
Okay, any other questions about the ordinance number 4?
I'll make a motion.
Yeah. Okay, so Ashley's made a motion to adopt ordinance number 4, 2023, amending chapter 57. Is there a second? Thank you, Robin. Is there any questions from the board on the motion? Is there any public comment or questions on the motion? Okay, ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Agenda item number 8 is discussion and possible adoption of ordinance number 5, 2023, which amends chapter 78, vehicles and traffic of the West Goshen Township Code of Ordinances. Kristen?
Same thing, we did advertise this on March 13th in the Daily Local, and I sent a copy of the ordinance to the Law Library and Daily Local. This is something that Dave asked me to prepare. You did review this at your last meeting. The first is that you had a section in your chapter 78, which is your vehicles and traffic section, that identified where traffic signals are, but there was no intersections listed. So Dave went back and identified where those intersections are. The main impetus for how this ordinance got started was that there was a request from the point to have signs installed so that they don't block the driveway. So the traffic that's queuing at that light there tends to block their driveway, and they asked that they be permitted to have a sign there. In researching that, they discovered that there already is a sign that had been installed at a different location.
Well, actually, the next driveway.
Next driveway down, that was not ordained. And in order for the police to be able to enforce those signs, it has to be codified into an ordinance. So that's what Section 2 does. And then Section 3 came about, again, sort of looking at this thing sort of develop. I think it was the police determined that at one point in time, the neighborhoods around East High School, the residents there had requested no parking at certain times because students who were driving didn't have sufficient place to park and they parked in their neighborhood. That is no longer the issue because now East has sufficient parking, and it has been requested that you remove these parking restrictions from those neighborhoods. So that's the purpose of these 3 sections of the ordinance.
And all this parking prohibited signs are gone now anyway,
They're
right?
gone, that's correct.
They've been up for a couple of years.
You might have missed one, I'll check it out. Okay, is there any questions from what Kristen has found about this ordinance? No? Okay, Well, I'll make the motion to adopt ordinance number 5, 2023, that amends chapter 78 of the West Goshen Township Code of Ordinances. Just a second. Thank you, Ashley. Any questions? Any public comments or questions? Okay, ready to take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Agenda item number 9, discussion and possible approval to participate in a national opioid settlement with various pharmaceutical companies. Chris, do you want to introduce this one?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Before the board this evening is information regarding potential participation by the township in a new national opioid settlement with various pharmaceutical companies. By way of background information, the township has participated in other settlements of this nature, including one with the PA Attorney General's office, which was approved by the board on December 7, 2021. As with that settlement, this would need to be approved by the Board of Supervisors in order to participate, and the deadline to submit these participation documents is April 18, 2023. I believe that this would involve 5 pharmaceutical companies.
I have a question. The attachment doesn't really, and maybe it comes later, is my question. How and where must these funds be utilized, and in what time frame? I didn't see that anywhere in there, or does that come once settlement?
All the documents that are before the board is everything that I've received on this settlement. So I can't say how they would be utilized or what the time frame would be. I don't know if we've actually received anything from the 2021 settlement that was approved by the board that was coming through the state. So I do not know what the time frame is.
Well, just following from a question, just to follow up on this, to push this a little bit more. It says the government entity agrees to use any monies to be seized through the, whatever, settlement, solely for the purposes provided therein, but it doesn't say anything what the therein is.
No.
So we have no idea.
The entire attachment doesn't
Well, I don't think there's a formal settlement that's been agreed yet, right? It seems like we're just opting in to participate in a negotiation to reach a settlement. That settlement would be, the settlement itself is defining what that means.
Well, what was the other settlement? What did it say then?
I don't remember unfortunately, I don't remember off the top of my
I
head.
don't either. Do we know how much money we got from them?
I don't think you got it.
I don't think it's been received.
No, I don't think you got it. I know that the county is the one that's allocating the funding, and I'm happy to speak to, because the first round of these, we did deal, I had a conversation with the county solicitor about it. So I think that there will be materials provided with the funding as to how they can be utilized. My understanding was that there was a settlement that was reached, at least in concept, and so the settlement agreements will outline how those funds can be used. And I think, again, somebody will distill that down to municipalities and provide you the guidance when they provide you that check. Not just write the check without giving you the materials that are going to limit how it can be used. And it's mainly to recoup costs that you've incurred as a result of the opioid. So, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you kept track of that or if there's a way to keep track of that, but I'm sure it's for maybe purchasing of, Narcan or whatever other materials that, your police force uses in
Which
dealing
don't
with.
you receive?
Yeah, we don't pay for that.
Yeah, but I think Good Fellowship does.
Yeah, I gave it to Good Fellowship, I believe. Yeah.
At the time of, I'm looking at the minutes from the December 7th, 2021 meeting, we did not have any direct expenditures, and it was recommended at the time any funds be forwarded to the ambulance companies.
But we never received any funds.
We haven't received anything yet.
What was the amount potentially to be received?
It's not.
I don't think it spells it out.
It's not
No,
spelled out.
It's a formula, I think. I think it's a formula. But I'm happy to get more information.
It was going, the funds were going to be sent to Good Fellowship. So that was the plan.
Well, my read of this is if we don't participate, we're certainly not going to proceed on our own. So
No.
there's also in here a belief that the more townships that sign up, the bigger the potential settlement deal could be.
And that was the discussion in 2021, that in order, if we did not participate, we would have to litigate on our own, which I agree with the discussion at the time, it's not a viable option.
So the deadline to submit is by April the 18th, so assuming we're going to go ahead with this, who will do the submittal of the documentation? Would that be you? Okay. Good enough.
Yeah, I'll take care of
And you get
it.
the
With,
volunteer.
with Kristen's assistance.
Yeah, I'll try to get more clarification on what are the settlement terms, what are the restrictions on the use, when you expect the money, how all that happens. I think the county solicitor is very familiar with all that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, exactly what's going to happen with the one that's already in place.
Right.
And I think we continue the practice of, if our police department has not had any direct expenses, distributing it to the ambulance companies.
Okay, so we need a motion then.
I'll make the motion.
Please, these two.
You get the NARC, you get our name for free.
Yes.
Okay.
So John has made the motion to participate in this national opioid settlement case, so is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any questions from the board on the motion? Any public comments or questions? Okay, ready to take a vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is item number 10, discussion and possible approval to relocate the previously approved ball-field dedication to Ray Halverson from West Goshen Community Park to Cloud Park.
Mr. Chairman, before the board this evening is consideration to relocate the ball field dedication that was approved for Ray Halverson by the board at West Goshen Community Park to Cloud Park. This was approved at the December 6, 2022 meeting, and it was for the Little League field at West Goshen Community Park. Subsequent to that, it was determined that Eastside Little League, which was the organization Mr. Halverson coached for, utilizes the field at Cloud Park for games. And due to his association with Eastside Little League, the applicant for the dedication, Mr. Edward Smith, who is here this evening, asked that the board consider relocating the field dedication to Cloud Park. They did consult with the family, and they support this relocation. And if approved, we will be looking to have it dedicated on July 3rd, 2023.
I just wanted to add, it's actually on July 3rd, 2023 at noon. Is when it's dedicated to the time it will be. And I just wanted to also add, as a personal friend and on behalf of the board, I'm very proud to offer this dedication to Ray for his contribution, his good work, and loyalty as a township employee, township supervisor, and as a role model to all the young boys he and Ed coached baseball for almost 20 years. These boys looked up to Ray and Ed, and they both helped them become the men they are today. Ray and Marie had 3 children, and he regarded the township his 4th child, which shows his dedication to West Goshen Township. And we thank him for that service.
Thank you, team.
I do believe that this was discussed at the recent Park and Recreation Board meeting, and they were in support of this relocation as well. Is that correct, Ed?
That's correct, Chris, yeah.
Very good. Well, I will make the motion then to relocate the field dedication for Mr. Ray Halverson to be Cloud Park.
And I'll second.
Thank you, John. Is there any questions or comments from the board or anyone in attendance? Very good. We'll take a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next is agenda item number 11, discussion and possible appointment of McCormick Taylor as traffic engineer for West Goshen Township. Chris.
Mr. Chairman, before the board this evening is consideration of a professional services agreement with McCormick Taylor to serve as the township's traffic engineer. Mr. Kolakowski and I have been discussing this previously, that due to the types of applications that the township is receiving, specifically the redevelopment of commercial properties, we know we just saw a presentation this evening for the zoning hearing board application for the Parkway Center. We have a land development application for the West Goshen Shopping Center in flight. We believe that it would be prudent to appoint a designated traffic engineer to review these land development applications. We have an existing relationship with McCormick Taylor, specifically Andy Parker, that has worked well. And previously, we've appointed this service on a project-specific basis. However, as we're seeing things come through, it would be, we think it would be better to have a designated appointed individual that Brian and I could utilize just for land development applications. We would continue to utilize Carroll Engineering for design and capital projects. So these costs received would be passed through to the applicant, and they review them. And the agreement that is before the board has been reviewed by the township solicitor, and all the comments that she had have been addressed and are in the document that's before the board this evening.
I'm sorry, so all board comments have been incorporated?
Yes, I apologize, yes, and any comments received from the board have been incorporated as well.
Okay. Questions from the board?
I just have one thing relative to the exclusions on the Cormac and Taylor's,
Which page do you want?
page 32. Under exclusions, they say that the consultant shall not provide any services associated with final design. Just wondering why.
They're not designing things for you, they're reviewing design.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not designing roads for you, or they're not designing projects, they are reviewing another design engineer's work on a development project.
Okay, you're saying any services associated with final design. So that would be anything.
That's for this contract. If we chose to, as a township, to do a project, we would need a traffic engineer, we would enter into an agreement for that project and that project alone.
Okay.
It'd be specific project-based.
Yeah, and I saw that in there. I
Yes.
understand that piece of it.
Yes, but so this proposal is strictly to engage with Cormac Taylor for quality and redevelopment, for the potential for the 929 Wawa development, for that they would be appointed as Carroll Engineering or HRG is appointed sewer authority or for the township as the supporting traffic engineer, that then when those applications come before the township for land development, they're sent directly to McCormick Taylor to start to review what's provided. Because we've seen a lot of infill developments that are all requiring traffic studies.
Maybe we could ask them to change, I don't know why they say final design and then comma, preparation of final
Yeah.
design plans. Maybe just get rid of with final design and say services associated with the preparation of final design plans and specs. I think that's more clear to you, Tina.
Yeah,
That's
it
what-
is, yeah.
Yeah.
That means they're not going to do anything, any
Yeah.
services associated with anything.
So it'd just be the preparation of, because if they're not going to be doing the final design plan.
Exactly, that's fine.
I think you're concerned that if they're looking at somebody else's final design, that this is excluding that.
Right.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
Okay, so strike final design. Any other comments, Dean?
No, that's it, thank you.
Anyone else from the board?
Just curious, for traffic studies such as like at Goshen Plaza, with the proposed Target and Chick-fil-A, which level classification would be utilized to perform that study? Any idea?
That project was done under a separate contract, so I don't.
You don't know.
We have a separate professional services contract with McCormick Taylor specific to the redevelopment of the West Goshen Shopping Center.
Okay, so that's separate from this agreement?
Yes, that was approved by the board back in October. We did that one, and that's kind of what, when that was envisioned, a question was raised to me by McCormick Taylor, does the township wish to have a general traffic engineer, so instead of doing the project-specific contracts with them, and at the time we said, no, we'll just continue it on a project-specific basis. However, in the last 6 months, everything that's been coming in has been some kind of commercial redevelopment that's necessitated the need for a traffic engineer, so or for a traffic review and studies. So instead of just going back and getting individual project contracts, it makes more sense to have a general traffic engineer for these types of land development applications that are coming through. And again, we bill the costs out every month as they're received, so we would have to pay the bill and then get the reimbursement from the applicant.
Okay. Well, again, I'm just trying to get a feel for what kind of hourly rate would they be charging for? Does it depend on the project, the size of the project, the age of the project?
You're talking about at the last page, which of these types of engineers should be doing the review?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit of both, a little bit of everybody. I mean, it depends on, if it's typically you'll have maybe the engineer 2 or engineer 3, and then you'll have that work being overseen by the senior project manager.
And then GIS work.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll have a little bit of everything.
All of the above, okay.
But again, you're not paying.
Yeah, I know, it's going to pay
We will pay it, so it will come through on our bills list, and then we seek reimbursement from the applicant.
And
Brian handles the billing every month.
I wouldn't give you know until they pay you back.
Correct.
Any other questions? Okay, Taylor to serve as the traffic engineer for West Goshen Township. Thank you, Ashley. Second. Thank you, Tina. Is there any questions from the board or from the public on the motion? Okay, ready to take a vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Next is agenda item number 12, discussion and possible appointment of the following officials in the West Goshen Township Code Enforcement Department. Interim Zoning Officer, Code Inspections, Inc., and Deputy Zoning Officer, Harrison Whalen. Chris?
Mr. Chairman, before the board this evening is consideration to appoint Code Inspections, Inc. and Harrison Whalen as interim zoning officer and deputy zoning officer respectively. As the board's aware, the township's previous assistant manager and zoning officer recently resigned her position. The board did appoint Code Inspections, Inc. to serve as code enforcement support at the reorganizational meeting this evening, and it is recommended that they serve as interim zoning officer while the search for a full-time replacement is conducted. They previously filled this role for us at the beginning of 2022. And then regarding Mr. Whalen, he was hired with the understanding he would be undertaking work related to zoning. He's been doing exceptionally well, and he is building his knowledge base, and we believe that he would be a good fit to serve as deputy zoning officer to have a full-time individual here as well.
Thanks, Chris. Is there any questions from the board?
He's doing well.
Brian, do you have anything? I think Harrison's doing a fine job.
He's doing well. Doing very well.
Yes, we also met our intern yesterday, our GIS intern, actually.
Emily.
Emily, yeah.
Emily, yes.
She said she really likes Julie doing work for the township versus the other firm that she was with, an electrical engineering firm.
Okay, then, there's no other questions. Is there a motion to appoint the Code Inspections as our interim zoning officer and Harrison Whalen as our deputy zoning officer? I will make that motion. Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. Is there any board comments or questions on the motion? Any public comments or questions? Okay, ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Agenda item number 13, discussion and possible approval of resolution number 12, 2023, authorizing the submission of a grant application to the PA Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Community Conservation Partnership Program. Wow, that's a mouthful. No wonder they call it C2P2, for improvements to West Goshen Community Park.
Mr. Chairman, before the board this evening is proposed resolution number 12, 2023. This would authorize the submission of a grant application to DCNR for the C2P2 program. This would be for the projects in West Goshen Community Park, including the improvements to the basketball courts, the addition of a family bathroom, the splash pad project, and the drainage improvements at the tennis courts. This application is similar to the one that was submitted in the fall to DCNR, but was not funded, unfortunately, during that special grant round. Our Parks and Recreation Director, Ken Lear, and I did have a conference call on Friday with our regional representative from DCNR, so we do have some tips and some notes to improve our application this time around, and Ken is working on that project. We did also apply to the Chester County Municipal Grant Program for this project as well, and we're waiting to hear the results of that application. There is a 50% match requirement with this program, and while there's no established funding maximum, I would anticipate a maximum funding amount of approximately $250,000. And just so the board is aware, the applications are due April 5th, but we probably would not hear the results until the October to December timeframe based on our conversation with our regional representative from DCNR. So there is going to be a long lead time. Just so the board is aware as well, in addition to this program as well as the county program, there's also a program through DCED that we're looking at as well that could be an additional funding source for these improvements, and that's due May 31st. So I haven't had a chance to look at the requirements of that program yet, but we are looking at that as another funding possibility.
Is that something that you will be working on with Ken to write and apply to and decide to go down there?
Yes.
So ultimately, we can have 3 grant applications in apply. We've got the one we've already submitted for county. We've got this one for the Pennsylvania C2P2 program, and it could be a third one.
Correct.
The intention here was to seek as much funding as possible to offset the relatively large cost of the scale of the improvements we have planned for the community park.
That is correct.
The board had previously decided that we wanted to see how those grant applications played out before we would authorize the project to proceed. I know there's some design elements we still need to finalize a little bit, but that's where we are, right?
Correct.
What would we know around all three of those applications? Would all three be known by the end of this year, or you don't know about the last one you just mentioned, when that would be?
I would anticipate, I've never done the DCD program, the Recreation Areas, Greenways and Trails. I've never applied for anything for that, but looking at the timeline, I would imagine we would have a good idea by the end of this year if everything is being funded. We should know the county program. I'm going to suspect, just given my history with them, probably I would say by the end of May, beginning of June, we might know about the county program. The state programs generally take a while to hear back from. As the board's aware, we applied for a stormwater project in December, and we're probably not going to hear back until September on that project. So there is a long lead time with state projects.
But we could, during the budget cycle for this year, budget for 2024 construction project, on the assumption that we'll still get about two of the grants.
Correct. I would agree with that.
What effect would, if we did receive some grant monies, would that affect us as far as matching requirement? Do we have to match out of township funds, or can it be from other grant sources?
It can be from other grant sources. You can't use, for example, like with DCNR, if we had been awarded the funding we applied for in the fall, we couldn't have used funding from DCNR to match another DCNR application in the spring.
As long as it's from another grant source?
Correct. So we could my plan in this application is to utilize potential funding from the county as part of our match requirement with DCNR with this application, even though we're not going to know, we know that that's in flight. And in fact, the project costs are going to exceed anything that we're going to get, so we'll exceed the match requirement.
A little worried about that project cost bill estimate. It's over 6 months old now, and just had a discussion tonight about all projects costing so much more.
That's why I'm looking at a third program.
When we don't receive the grant, do we ever know who did?
The county publishes all the awards that go out. I do know with the, I don't know the specific communities, but I do know a lot of the funding for the fall grant round that we weren't awarded went to, how do I want to put this delicately, went to underprivileged communities.
I do think as part of the process when we get to the budget time, if we should re-estimate the cost of the overall scope that you have outlined here, understand what the total grants are that we are either getting or not getting, and we may end up deciding we have to take some more bites of this project.
And if I'm remembering the discussion from last year, that was the whole plan from the board, was to see what kind of grant funding we could secure, and then based on those results, reevaluate everything.
Does it corrupt the grant process if we apply for a grant with certain scope, description, and project, etc., and then end up saying, well, actually, we're doing this, but we're using the grant money provided? Is that a problem?
You're more or less locked in with what you propose. You can make some minor adjustments here and there, but I think if you were to say, well, apply for these 4 projects and then say, okay, we're not going to do this portion of the project, I've never run into that situation, but they may sort of change the funding,
Like
the size of the amount.
We had talked about at one point, I think, moving the demo park, because that was paid for with the grant. And you would have to then go back to the county or wherever we got that grant from and say, we actually have to move it and get certification to do that.
Yep.
So I think you are locked in, actually, I think.
And then the scope.
Yeah, I mean, I think the award is given based on your application and description of your scope of services.
But if certain things change, you go back to the grant entity, and if something changes, as long as it's not significant, I mean, it's going to be, you're going to run into some issues if you start changing the scope of work. You're kind of locked in the project.
I would it's just my thoughts, if the board agrees, I think we should fairly soon ask our engineer to re-estimate the scope of this work, given the conversation we had earlier tonight in terms of expected cost for it. Because it was pretty substantial to start with, including the stormwater piece of it.
It was just under $1 million.
Kind of agree. Want to see where we stand and how much money it's going to cost the township on top of that. What,
Well, assuming you're awarded, going with the cost estimate that was provided previously, assuming that you're awarded from these two sources, 250 and 250, then you're looking at a roughly $500,000 outlay from the township.
If the cost is still that.
if it's still the same, or can we eliminate certain pieces of it in submitting the application?
We've already submitted the one application. This was, we make a decision tonight on submitting this against this scope, so the only one we can change is the third one, which at this point, it's sticking with the cause.
To be honest with you, I think at this point, at this time of year, if you want to submit applications, you kind of stay the course. If you want to reevaluate it, then we don't submit this application. We see what happens with the county funding. I don't know what's going to happen with that, and then reevaluate it accordingly. That's a policy decision for the board.
Well, I think we should, another question for you, Chris, is I know you just got some feedback from how to, apply for this one that's coming up here, the C2P2 program. Have you got enough time to incorporate that? It's coming up pretty quick, so.
It's essentially going to be the same as the program from the fall, which I have a copy of the application that was submitted in the fall. So I'm not too terribly concerned about that from a timing perspective. And in doing the updates, the changes that were suggested to us were not, in my opinion, were not significant.
All right.
So we can't cut any pieces of this out in submitting the application?
I mean, you could. You would have to change the cost estimate, and then you would potentially be running the risk of being awarded an application, a grant from the county for one scope of work, and then a grant from the state on another scope of work. So they would be inconsistent. So if you wanted to do anything, I would say don't submit any applications and see what happens with the county program, and then you could always submit next year for this program is every year, so you can always submit for that. But I think I do not believe it would be prudent to cut things out from this application and make it inconsistent with the county program.
Why would we want to cut anything out at this point anyway?
From a cost standpoint,
Well, we're applying for grants, so we'll see how it
we
goes.
still have to put our portion into it. So I was saying, if you cut something out, then that would shred the pie of how much money we have to put out.
Yeah, but now we're not comparing apples to apples, right? We're going to apples to something else. So it's going to create a lot of confusion here.
Tina, if you submit a grant application for a project, you cannot change the project for that grant.
Yeah, once it's awarded, I understand that.
That's what I was saying.
But I'm doing this before it's awarded.
Yeah, and if the grants don't come through, then we can take,
Have a grant
and then
Yeah, you have
take
to
another
go
look
out
at
there.
We have an application.
Yeah, I know.
For this scope of work.
I know.
I mean, my preference is to push on with this, apply for this. Hope to get both grants. It's $500,000. We know we've got $1 million in restricted parts, and the intention is to really improve the community park with these improvements, and using half of that balance to do that was a viable project. So what I'm curious about is whether that close to $1 million project is now $1.3 million, and it's starting to get out of reach.
And how much do we?
But it doesn't stop us applying for this grant, as far as I'm aware, and then ultimately we can say the total budget is beyond now has risen because of pressures in the construction labor market such that we can't do these projects.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to submit the application for a C2P2 grant to the PA Department of Conservation
I'll second it.
Resources. Thank you, Jack. Any further questions or comments on the motion? Is there any public comments or questions? Okay, ready to take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Okay, now we're up to agenda item number 14, discussion and possible approval of resolution number 13, 2023, authorizing the destruction of certain records of the West Goshen Township Police Department.
Mr. Chairman, before the board is proposed resolution number 13-2023. This is for records pertaining to the West Goshen Township Police Department. A copy of the records being requested for destruction has been included in the packet before the board this evening and has been approved by Chief of Police, Ms. Mike Carroll. In accordance with Act 428 of 1968, a resolution from the board is required prior to the destruction.
Do we need to say in the resolution that the procedure for the disposition of records, electronic and manual records, or just records? Because right now it doesn't specify whether it's electronic or manual or both.
Everything we're destroying is paper.
Oh, okay. Should we put that language in there? Is that required?
You could, but it's not required.
Okay. Just to make it clear what we're disposing of.
Are any of these contained electronically?
I would say most likely yes.
Okay, so it's both.
No, we aren't destroying any electronic.
Oh, we're not destroying electronic, it's just paper.
Correct.
So should we say that in here, just the paper records are going to be destroyed, not the electronic, in the resolution?
Or you will have.
That is that's the discretion of the board. As far as I am aware, the differentiation is not required. But if the board would like that added in there, we can certainly add it in there. It doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt anything.
How does the board feel about that?
I'm fine with that, if that's the cut, yeah.
Okay. So Chris, you did prepare this resolution with the signature page. Now go to the page.
I'll have it taken care of.
Once again.
Okay, so with that clarification, there's paper records destruction only. Is there any other questions from the board? Okay. Will someone make a motion to approve resolution number 13, 2023, for the destruction of certain records of the West Goshen Township Police Department? No, I didn't. I just asked this all make the motion. So John made the motion. Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. Is there any questions or comments from the board or the public? Very good. We'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Agenda item number 15, reports for the month of February, starting with the police report presented by Chief Michael Carroll.
Thank you. The report from the police department for February 2023, we responded to 1,929 calls for service, 53 of which were alarms, and one of those alarms was found to be valid. 68 accidents, 27 of which were reportable, and drove a total of 15,072 miles. We conducted extra traffic enforcement on Taylor Pike, Norfolk Avenue, Sunset Hollow Road, Spruce Avenue, South New Street, Greenhill Avenue, Grove Road, South Five Points Road, and South High Street. In the area of career development, we did our normal monthly trainings. And in addition to that, Officer Graham attended the FBI Alert Active Shooter Level 1 training. Officer Burnt and Walsh attended proactive patrol tactics training. Officer Story attended a SWAT command decision-making and leadership school. Sergeant Holman, Sergeant Taylor, and Officer Graham attended a negotiator conference. And Detectives Cuddy and Edwards attended the DEA social media investigation class. We've received 26 assists from other departments. Provided 26 assists to other departments, a total of 24 hours of service, and we received 30 assists from other departments. That's the report for the police department. I'll certainly be happy to answer any questions you have.
I have a couple of questions, Chief. Can you give us an update on the hiring of the new police officer?
Yes, we did offer him conditionally an offer of employment about a week ago. He accepted that offer. Since then, he's gone through the physical and psychological testing and passed everything. So we intend to move ahead with the April 4th swearing ceremony.
And can you give us an update on the vetting process for promoting a sergeant to lieutenant? Where are we at with that?
So we have one more. This week is the last week of sergeant sitting up front and going through the process, after which we'll get together and make a decision.
So when do you think that process will be completed?
The decision, I think it'll be completed pretty quickly, and then we'll determine how we're going to move forward as far as money.
So we're looking at maybe also the first meeting in April as well?
No, I don't think we'll be ready for that.
Okay, so maybe the second meeting in April?
Or perhaps May.
May, okay. I'm just trying to get an idea, timeline.
It'll be, I'm sorry, John, just
Sure,
to
go
follow on that, so it'll be the command staff that's going to review the outcome of the rotations and have a conversation with you.
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry, John.
And the F-150, the Lightning electric vehicle, where is that at as far as putting that into service?
So it is in service. It doesn't have all of the lighting and radios in it yet. They're on order, so as soon as they come in, it'll be fully outfitted, but it is in service.
Do you have any idea when that might happen?
Waiting on
Supply
parts.
chain
We've
issues?
been doing it for a couple of years now, who knows?
Have you got your police sign yet?
So
Next week.
It's gonna be installed next week, or you're
I showed you the picture of
Oh,
it.
you did? I was like, it's in the it's in the
Sure,
warehouse.
that
When
was
is
just
it?
like right out. I love it. You were waiting for that question.
Okay.
So it'll be installed next week.
Next question I have, the next community police advisory meeting is on April 20th, I believe.
it is.
And we should be having some presentations at that time, I believe, from policing from the African-American community perspective as well as from the Latino perspective.
Correct. We have 2 presenters coming to the meeting.
Okay. And you'll be sending an email to the usual folks reminding them of that.
And social media, we'll advertise on social media. We'll send out email to people who have come in the past,
Mhm.
and then social media advertising.
Okay. Very good. That's all I have.
Team, I know we're doing a good job of that. More detailed information, data collecting on the assist to farms. And obviously we need, years worth of data to really understand what's happening. Do you have any gut feel as to if there's a trend there or not? That we see more and more need for assist to our farm?
I think we have more of a need assist to us than we had when I got here. If we go back 25 years ago, I think it's remaining pretty steady over the past several years.
Okay.
As
So
far
how
as-
the data to confirm or?
I'll have to go back and review it. It's not something we normally reported on, so the numbers are newer, but as a feeling for what we see on the street, I believe it's higher than it was before.
The license plate readers, has there been more and more kind of success with using those in terms of stolen vehicles or other?
So we see successes, I would say weekly. I don't know that it's increased. It's pretty steady, but we see successes with it over.
Anyone else with questions for the chief? Any public questions for the chief? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There are also reports in the agenda materials that were posted for this meeting from the usual Chester County Department of Emergency Services, Westchester Fire Company, Good Fellowship, and Goshen Fire. So I'm assuming if the board has any questions with those, you'll follow up with the respective chiefs.
I just wanted, another thing I want to bring up before we leave this topic. We had a chance to tour the shooting range today, Tina Marie and I, along with the chief. And there's some maintenance issues there, Woody, I'd like to talk to you about, see if we can address them. So I'll talk to you after the meeting.
I remember I asked a question when you mentioned that. Do other departments use the shooting range?
Yes, the departments that are members of the ERT team are allowed to use it. Of those, I think 3 or 4 actually do use it.
Does that use cause more wear and tear? And if so,
No. The specific wear and tear we're referring to is just the items sitting out in the run.
Okay, thank you.
It's the wood, basically.
Wood.
The wood is
Okay.
rotted.
All right, so let's see where we're up to. So next is Board of Supervisors announcements. Tina.
Yeah, just a few things. On March 9th, I rode with the police. Thank you, Mike and Mike Cotter, for setting that up. Went through a day with the police, which was extremely interesting, and I know there's a lot of paperwork involved in being a police officer. And it's very interesting, very informative, and I learned a lot. So I hope there'll be other opportunities I can take advantage of and do that many more times. On March 23rd, I'm going to be attending the COG emergency training. On the 24th, there's a Westchester University Peace Forum. On March 27th, we're going to have our next fire and EMS coalition meeting.
What day was that?
The 27th of March at 5 o'clock is going to be the coalition meeting. And then our next SAC meeting is going to be on March 28th. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Tina. Alvin? Okay, thanks, Alvin. John?
Sure. Sunday, February 14th, I attended a volunteer recognition ceremony at the Brandywine Valley SPCA. There was about 8 or 9 folks who were recognized. They had put in over 4,000 hours of volunteering there at the SPCA. I know at least one person that put in 7,200 hours. That's incredible. I mean, it just shows you the kind of folks we have living in our area. But anyway, it was pretty impressive. Then on Thursday, February 23rd, I attended the Fire and EMS Coalition on Tina and meeting with the representatives from our essential service providers. On Saturday, March the 4th, attended another community book discussion at the Milton Center and participated in talks about equity, diversity, and inclusion in our community. It was pretty well attended. On Tuesday, March 14th, I participated in the Land Planning Committee and heard a development proposal to erect several billboard monuments in West Goshen Township. And we let the developer know where our feelings were. On Tuesday, March the 21st, I had a tour today of the West Goshen Police Department shooting range with the Chief Carroll. Tomorrow, there's going to be an open house at the 156 District Representative Pioli. Recently opened his office there at 121 Minor Street, and it's going to be happening between 5 and 7 p.m. And I think Tina already mentioned about the COG training that's going to be happening on Thursday, which I hope to attend as well.
Thanks, John. Ashley?
Sure. On February 20th, I attended the Goshen County Association Township Officials Meeting, Sustainable Pennsylvania through Pennsylvania Municipal League. So there's an organization called the Pennsylvania Municipal League, you probably know what I'm talking about. They have a designation called Sustainable PA, which I think is really interesting and something you should go after, so I'm going to be writing that to the SAC to see what they think about it. We have the COG meeting coming up on the 23rd. Thursday in Cokeville. WC Peace Forum this Friday night. Melanie Ryle.
The State Award. The State Award recognition.
Yes, so I
Don't forget that.
the most important thing to announce is we have won the 2023 Governor's Local Excellence Award for local government excellence. That's really exciting. So
We had in
we're
Harrisburg.
going to Harrisburg.
What is it, April
12th?
Yeah.
So it's actually for the Sustainability Committee, so there's all these different categories it falls into, and so I applied for the Health and Wellness one.
Awesome. Good job. Good team you have there. Anything else, Ashley? So the board held executive sessions on February the 24th to review performance management objectives with the township manager, and on March the 7th, where we discussed personnel matters with the township manager, legal issues with our solicitor. I attended a pension committee visit to a potential investment advisor as part of the RFP process that we're doing on February the 28th. On March the 14th, I participated in the land planning committee public meeting, and we reviewed the Catalyst experience proposal that did not proceed. And I attended a meeting on March the 15th of the pension committee, which was a special meeting as part of the ongoing deliberations on the RFP. Moving on to agenda item number 17, Township Manager's announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first announcement I'll make is PennDOT is undertaking work on 322. It actually began yesterday, I believe. Today was the first day, okay. So they are undertaking work on 322 right now. We did post information in a press release from PennDOT on the Township website. We will have an article in the newsletter. Do expect lane closures associated with that. The work today began with tree work that they are doing in the state right of way, including tree removal. So they do have one of the lanes. They did have one of the lanes shut down today. I don't know, Dave. Do we have a date on how long that's going to last?
I heard from the contractor a month.
Okay.
Is that the stuff on high when you're coming onto the bend with all the?
No,
That's a different project? Okay.
So they are undertaking work. They are undertaking work on 322 right now. Next thing I have is our e-newsletter will go out this Friday. So articles are being finalized for that. The Township's annual egg hunt and decorated hat parade will be on April 1st at West Goshen Community Park at 10:30 a.m. Speaking of park gazebo dedication for the new gazebo in West Goshen Community Park will be March 31st at 6 p.m., which is a Friday evening. In speaking with Ken and talking about the tour of the township parks that we talked about last month, we are targeting May 4th for that tour. I will get more information out to the board to finalize that. Okay. Star Wars joke? Good. So we're targeting May 4th for that tour, but I will get more information out to the board as we get closer. Looking at their trips, they do have 10 spaces remaining for the bus trip on March 29th to New York to see Bad Cinderella, and 2 spaces remaining for the bus trip to see Hamilton in May.
How many was for the one for Cinderella? How many?
10. 10 more remaining.
Okay.
We also have a shredding and e-waste event on April 8th here at the Township Building from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. All information on the shredding and e-waste event are on the Township website in the calendar and will be in the e-news going out on Friday. And then finally, the Traffic Safety Committee is scheduled to have their next meeting on April 6th at 9 a.m. at the Township Building.
I'm just curious, what is the township's policy on these trips? I mean, do you have to have 50% filled, 100% filled? I mean, is there a percentage before the trip will be canceled?
I have to ask Ken that question. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if we've run into a situation recently where those have had to be canceled, but I can check with Ken and follow up.
Usually they don't. We've had a lot of success with them usually.
I know.
I do know that the Washington Blooms trip, the Cherry Blossom Festival is completely sold out, and Ken is looking to get a second bus and is starting a wait list as well because that one's filled up.
Yeah, I did the New York City bus tours, 2 of them last year, and both of them, well, one was full on a bus, and the other one was 2 buses worth. So they're pretty popular.
They're popular and they get a good turnout, but I can ask Ken the question if there's a policy if they.
Yeah, I just wonder what the cutoff is. I mean, do we have to reach a certain threshold in order for it to be a cut even kind of deal?
I can ask him. Ken is at the PRPS conference this week, so I can ask him when he gets back.
Okay.
I can ask Tom as well. So those are all my announcements.
Thank you, Chris. Township engineer.
I have one general announcement for the board. The farmer block has invited the township to their opening ceremony, ribbon cutting. That will be March 24th at 9 o'clock, 9:15 in the morning at their new facility on 800 North 5 Points Road. They passed the invitation along to me. They did come. Their director of operations, Renee Gonzalez is his name. He was here at the planning commission meeting, introduced himself, and he sent me a formal invitation to that ribbon cutting. It is this coming Friday morning, which will probably include a tour of their facility.
What was it?
Yeah, what's this facility?
Farmer block, it's 800 North 5 Points Road.
Yeah, what is it? Sorry.
It is a process research and development site.
What date was it, March?
24th.
24th.
It's Friday.
At what time?
9 o'clock in the morning. He says 9-9:15 is what his invite says. So it's right along 202.
What was the address again? 800 North 5 Points?
Yes. It's right past Wayne's Moving Storage. Yes.
Any updates on Woodland?
Yes, that's next. I'm just waiting until there are more questions on farmer block. So.
I'm sure there are, but we don't know anything about it. So.
Okay, yeah, so it's a new tenant. They fit the building out. I did hear from them they're looking to do more expansion in the future of that site. They've asked me some questions about zoning and land development for what they would do, but there's just been conversations with that.
So it's all internal fit out, there's no change to the building?
Currently, there's not anything external that I know of.
It's like past the ice skating or the.
Yes.
Baseline.
Keep going past those lines.
What
To get to the airport, they went too far.
They came to the planning commission?
The director of operations was in the audience.
Was there a particular reason he was attending?
Just want to introduce himself.
Okay.
That's all it was. So stormwater announcements, I don't know if you're aware, but the NPDS BMP manual, that's been the Bible of stormwater design since 2006, was issued in late December, early January, they actually was, maybe in February. After 17 years of work, they finally issued the next update for comment. So there'll be a lot of changes coming if this manual gets adopted. There's a lot of more onus on the developer and the developer's engineers of how they look at developing a site. Now, it still only applies to a project that's 1 acre or more in disturbance, so a lot of our projects don't need to necessarily rise to that level. So it's, from everything I've read and all the presentations I've sat through, it hasn't dropped to the level of a normal single-family house. But if you start doing lots or commercial developments, that's when you can trigger that threshold. One of the big changes in the manual is pre-development testing of the site to site your stormwater and site the buildings so you're using the best soils on your property for stormwater management, not for the building.
So we're just testing for soil, type of soil, not for any
No,
contaminants?
it's all for infiltration. I forget.
Okay.
Yes, it's pre-application, pre-engineering infiltration testing before they start the project. And there's a requirement in the manual on how many tests per acre you have to do, and depending on what kind of test it is, you do more or less of what kind of. It's a very technical manual. It was authored by the engineering department at Villanova with one engineer in practice on the committee and one person from DEP. But the main part of the thrust of who wrote the manual was driven by Dr. Traver and his group at Villanova. So
She's saying it's just in the comments period right now, like, or is
it's out for public comment.
And will this have a force of law?
This is not, well, the last manual was adopted as the final draft. So the enforcement of it was by DEP and the Conservation District through their NPDS permitting process. It really doesn't, I have no authority to enforce it, and the township doesn't have authority to enforce it. The enforcement comes from an application that rises to the level of needing an NPDS permit. For example, Greystone, or anything that's over an acre of disturbance. You have a couple, 300 Senator Avenue is one, they have an NPDS permit. Trying to be else is in front of me right now, but going down the list. Depending on what happens with the airport, if they expand with enough disturbance in a project, which is an acre, the WAWA will need an NPDS when they get there. So depending on when they apply, they may be under the new requirements. They may not be, depending on when this manual is adopted.
Do you see it going residential eventually?
No,
Over an
it
acre?
will not go less than an acre.
I mean, if it's over an acre residential, do you see that happening?
It is now.
Oh, yeah, it
Okay.
doesn't matter what.
It doesn't matter what the disturbance is.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying most single-family house develop, like somebody buys a lot to build a house on a single lot that's not part of a Greystone development. I've only in my career dealt with 2 projects that had enough disturbance to get to an acre, being that small, being a single-family project. Typically, house lots aren't big enough to disturb enough acreage. So that's the
Yeah, so
general.
you'll reap the benefits of it because anything that requires an NPDS permit, they're designed towards those permit requirements.
Yes.
They're not gonna, even if your stormwater ordinance doesn't reference that, it doesn't matter. They're gonna just, you're doing it once, so they're doing it based on the state standard.
And the ordinance basically references the BMP manual by reference. So,
We'll have to just double check that to make sure there's not any outdated references in any of your code. You can search the term, make sure there's not any to be updated.
So just going back to this like example we had tonight of the Wawa, right?
Yes.
You're saying it would fall under this new.
Yes.
So what happens if the composition of Wawa where they want it and say, well, the heck with this, we're leaving it alone, now we're left with, you know?
I don't know how it's going to shake out with BMP and NPDS. This manual is just out for public comment. I think it's out for 90 days, for 3 months. And then they get the comments back and they have to go through the process of addressing them and go through the process of publishing the final draft. And that's all they got to in 2006 when the last manual came out was a draft. It was never formally adopted so they could change it. It took 17 years to change it.
I'm sure there's a waiver and modification process built into it. It's gotta be.
And they're going to make the comments public?
They have to. It'll be part of the manual. It'll be a whole appendice of all the comments and all the ways to address it.
Is it worthwhile to have anybody at the township look at it and give comments? No?
Because unless we have a project that rises to NPDS level, it's very, very restrictive and much more detailed in designs and engineering basis than the last one was, which was more of, and this stresses trying to separate storms, so basically treat the 2-year and handle the 2-year and bypass the rest of the storms to another structure, so you're not overloading one stormwater structure on the property, so you're going to be losing more area of properties to stormwater structures to accomplish this. So in a way, it's going to limit.
It sounds like a good challenge from developer groups.
It might. It might. Yeah, that's the ones I think are going to have the biggest issues. I sat through 3 presentations on them already, so I've had and I've read parts of it, looked at it, looked through the presentations that they gave. It is onerous on developers, and the only time you would fall under it if we do something that would fall under the guise of a 1-acre disturbance, which the only project that may fall under is depending how big the park projects could be. That could be where it could fall into something the township would have to consider as part of their design, is following the PDS. So that's stormwater announcements. What is a Greystone? A couple things that are going underway. They're making very good progress on the dams, pouring the concrete. I believe either this week or next week they may do their final pour on one of the dams. I forget which one because I can't keep them straight. There's 182, 184, but they're working. They still have to do a lot of the finish work, so it's still on target potentially by this summer for the dams. They're also at the same time working on the repairs and the repointing and the parging of the pedestrian bridges on the trail network to get those cleaned up, get those finished, to get those done so we can continue moving on installing trails. Okay. So that's where Greystone stands. And we're seeing 8 to 10 permits a week still in Greystone.
At one time, we had a checklist, I guess, of things that needed done by the developer in Greystone before dedication of that park could be considered. Where are we at with that? I mean, do we know what projects or tasks that are still remaining to be completed, and do we have a timeline on when they might be completed?
I have not been requested. You were talking about a punch list for prior to dedication. I have not received a request. The only punch list I'm aware of that was done was the punch list for the roads that Rick and Dave did. I'm not aware of a punch list that was done for the open space. So the open space punch list has to be requested by the developer. It's only meant to request it from the township. And then we would do the punch list and give them the laundry list of everything that they need to accomplish in that particular area. So it's not something we can drive the schedule. It's driven by the developer. Because until he gets through all that and does all the work and doesn't get his money back, then he has bonded the project and he doesn't get dedicated, we don't accept dedication.
What I'm trying to get at is, do we have any idea of a timeline when dedication might be feasible for the township?
No. No, it's up to the developer.
Well, we can ask. I mean, we can inquire, John.
Yeah. I'm sure, I know the developer wants to keep moving and get out of there, but part of the problem, it's also tied to the developer is still involved until certain thresholds are hit with houses and homeownership for even being off the HOA board. And I keep on hearing from HOA that it's 4 to 5 years till they expect the HOA to be turned over to them.
Yeah, but that's not going to hold them up on completing the improvements. I mean, they're
the dedication of the roads won't happen until all the construction's done.
Right.
But open space, if they continue making progress, they may get far enough that they can get a punch list this year, they may not. Maybe next year they'll get a punch list. We're still having to deal with the serpentine gardens and deer. There's 2 things we haven't dealt with yet.
If I'm remembering correctly, just the bridge work alone was going to take 2 to 3 months to complete. I remember that discussion previously.
Yeah.
Well, the 17 grounds is an issue. We did ask, I believe, that we wanted to try to facilitate a meeting with the developer, with staff, and maybe with natural land, to say whatever had been envisaged as part of the original conditional use agreement. Where are we? Does it still make sense? Apparently there was some burning involved. No one thinks that's a good idea anymore, but we don't want this kind of left hanging where they think they're done and nothing was ever done to prepare it and hand it over as part of the park. So,
Based on my conversation with Ray Rukowski in January, they were doing some of the barren work in January. They were starting to do some of that work. But yes, they were working on the barren in January because the vegetation is dead already. They don't have to kill it, they can go out there.
is Rick involved with keeping an eye on these, so the work that's supposedly doing?
He's still involved with particularly with the pedestrian bridges and the dams because of the structural work. But as far as the barren work, they were doing per the plan. So they being whoever the contractors hired by RLD.
So it sounds like there's a bit of a gap there to me between developers saying, oh, we're taking care of it, and we're focused on the engineering aspects of the development, the bridges and trails and roads, but how do we know that what was intended to be done is being done correctly?
The only thing I know from the conversation being done in the barrens in January was selective removal of trees. That's what they told me, when they remove certain tree species that they knew they had to remove, that were already pre-flagged, they could get to easier in January because of frozen ground and other vegetation being down. And that's all that they told me they were doing in January, was removing trees.
So is it still, I still don't want to let it slip that we said we thought it would be a good idea to have people meet around the table and have a conversation around what is being done, what is still to be done. Does it all make sense in the grand scheme of things, and everybody's on the same page? So.
I think we need to do that, because we have things that are from the township, and we have to have in place, namely, how are we going to manage this piece of property?
We
will be inquiring at some point.
We did have an internal meeting with myself, Dave, and Doreen and Mike Gunther in the Parks Department to talk about management of the Greystone property should be in-house or outsourced, and I did provide them with a copy of the plan that Natural Lands prepared for the township. So we had, that was last week, I believe we talked.
Yeah, because I was in there.
Yeah. Last week or the week before. It was within the last 2 weeks.
So Allison was here today. She's their lead point person. She's the one that really knows what's going on. I'm happy to try to coordinate that meeting. And of course, if a lot of us play with the zoning officer on and trying to do a bunch of different jobs, we can definitely try to facilitate that.
I think that would be a good idea, because we need to get a better handle on this. Exactly what needs to be done, still where we're at. Like Sean said, is it being done properly?
Sure.
And what does the timeline look like?
And from a budget standpoint, we need to know what it's going to cost us.
Yeah, I don't think you need natural lands at that meeting, but to start with, but if there's an issue about what they think is needed to be done, or an interpretation, we should bring in them as a substitute parent expert if needed.
And Natural Lands did offer to serve as like a consultant to be that transition between when we take it over and when we manage it, to train up the staff and we do it in-house.
Anything else, Brian?
That's all I have.
Thank you. Zoning officer's announcements. Is there anything from a zoning perspective?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of any other applications before the zoning hearing board besides the one for the Parkway Center that was discussed earlier this evening. I do know that they met on February 27th and issued decisions on the applications for 546 Taylor's Mill, 809 Joick Drive, and I do not remember the third application.
It was withdrawn.
No, there was a third one besides the one on Ashbridge that they issued a decision on. I don't remember what it was on the top of my head, but yes, the application for 1100 Ashbridge Drive was withdrawn. No, that was that was approved.
The Ashbridge Drive was the
deck.
The deck was on the side of the house that stuck out the back.
That was withdrawn by the applicant. That was withdrawn by the applicant. It was withdrawn. I think it was withdrawn the day the hearing was supposed to occur. I don't remember. It was withdrawn pretty close to the hearing.
And that was one in Ashbridge?
Correct.
Yeah, 1110 Ashbridge, right, okay. Which makes sense.
I apologize. I don't remember what the third application was that they decided on. Let me just look real quick. And they will not be meeting on March 26th. 820 East Washington Street was the other one. That was the car dealership that was going to the floodplain area. They came and presented before the board. That was sometime late last year. So they issued decisions on 820 East Washington Street, 220 Garfield Avenue, and 546 Taylor's Mill Road. And they heard the case for 809 Jowett Drive, but I believe they did also issue the decision on that one as well.
What was the decision on 820 East Washington?
I'm gonna have to go back and look at it. I don't remember off the top of my head.
820 East Washington was just resubmitted to me for land development last week. So assuming because they resubmitted, the zoning hearing board gave them decisions they needed. This is the one that's the car servicing facility for the $20 million cars. Yes.
That's in a floodplain.
Yes.
So it wasn't until
No, it still has to go through land development.
Still has to go through land development. Just resubmitted last week, and it didn't. Their application's not complete. The resubmission's not complete yet. I just got the electronic submission.
And I know we're still waiting on some of these decisions to be signed by members of the zoning hearing board, so that's why we don't have the full documents yet to circulate.
Okay.
But there will be no meeting on the 20th, Monday, the 27th.
There will be no meeting in March or in April.
Or in April, that's correct.
The April meeting is moved to May because it conflicts with
Very good, thanks Chris. So now on to agenda item number 20, which is approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of February the 21st. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Tina. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So is there any changes that are necessary to the meeting minutes?
Yeah, just one suggestion, or one, the first sentence there on the February 21st, minutes to change that from Tuesday, January 17th to Tuesday, February 21st.
And we'll make that change.
That's all I have.
Okay, ready to take, is there any public comment on the motion? Okay, ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Last on the agenda is item number 21, which is approval of the Treasurer's report dated February the 28th, the General Fund, the Sewer Revenue Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, and the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds. I'll make the motion to approve the Treasury report and the bills to be paid. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ashley. Is there any board comments or questions on the report or the bills?
I just had one on page 14 where we had a fuel spill. Fuel spill cleanup, $2,483 and $539.
That wasn't a fuel spill, that was from the school district through the West Town Lake pump.
What was it for?
The West Town Lake pump station.
But it's listed as a fuel spill cleanup.
Yeah, you weren't at the sewer authority meeting. That happened that night, or that day. School district's going to reimburse us.
Oh, okay.
What page was it on?
14.
14.
It's about $3,000 total.
Yeah.
It was due payment to Wind River Environmental.
Yes.
Yes, it's okay, right, Dave, with the
Yeah,
treatment plant?
there's actually going to be 2 or 3 invoices coming through. But the school district, Mike's in contact with the school district, they're going to reimburse us, all of our funds.
All right, is there any other questions on the...
Just, on page 3, there's a listing. Remind me again, what is this Cold Springs Bridge Fund? What is that for?
Cold Springs Development has a bridge.
Well, this is a development
A
in
third
Cold
of the way,
Springs?
Cold Springs down off Old West Town Road.
Okay, and they have a fund for this?
I believe it's an escrow fund in the event that there has to be maintenance that's done. That has to be done to it. I could be incorrect on that. I can check with Christine, but that's my understanding that that's what it's set up for.
So it's to reimburse the township if the township has to perform any maintenance on this particular bridge?
That's my understanding.
It's a privately owned bridge?
No, it's a public street.
A public street, so it's owned by the township? It's a township street?
Yeah.
So the township owns the bridge?
Correct.
So is it really an escrow, or is it just a...
Maybe escrow is...
It's a restricted money deposited for township use solely for the benefit of maintaining that bridge, is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
So this is something from that development for the bridge, okay.
That's my
And
understanding.
only can be used for that purpose?
Yeah.
this thing here to be in, for around
I don't know what hell that's supposed to be.
Yeah, it might have been from some kind of conditional
Yeah, I
use
don't know if
order
it was zoning approval.
or zoning approval.
Not familiar with
I don't remember when they started that, you know, longer was?
that. Yeah.
I can check with
Is it
Christine.
pretty good shape?
Yeah, it's a nice box culvert. 2 or 3 channels, I think. I remember when it was sent, but I haven't done.
I can check with Christine just to verify that that's what that's for, but that's what I believe it is. It's for maintenance if it ever has to be done. That predates my time, so I can't answer that question directly.
Based on the $800,000 project that's maintaining an existing culvert, I'm sure 50,000 is not going to be enough. It does come up. It's a dead meat. All right, so is there any other questions or comments on the bill or report? Okay, ready to take a vote? All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? I'll make the motion. Is there a second? Thank you. All in favor of adjournment say aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, Woody?
Yeah.
We stopped down to the, take a look at the shooting